Top story then, the G8 summit's just drawn to an end in Northern Ireland, with Syria, as predicted, one of the most pressing topics up for discussion. Despite major disagreements, the leaders did manage to come up with a joint statement end of the day. Russia's president commented on what's been achieved and what differences still remain. RT's Polly Boyka was following the news conference at Lochern for us.
Statement from all the G8 leaders is being presented as somewhat of a triumph. They managed to come together and issue this statement on Syria from everybody. One thing that Vladimir Putin said in the press conference is that everybody agrees that the only way forward is diplomatic and a diplomatic resolution to the crisis in Syria. They want to see all the sides around the negotiating table. They want to see the Geneva II conference happen as soon as possible. No date for it has been set yet, though. And of course, we know that Vladimir Putin spoke about a number of sticking points that remain between Russia's point of view on the Syrian crisis and everybody else's. One of them is chemical weapons. Now, Vladimir Putin reiterated that Russia doesn't find the evidence provided by the Americans very convincing, so the Russian government doesn't have any proof that chemical weapons have been used in Syria. And he also mentioned that a number of other G8 leaders also question the claims that have been made by the US government. It wasn't a case of 7 against 1. Other leaders have been questioning that information as well. He said that there needs to be a full investigation into the use of chemical weapons in Syria, and that needs to be, in order to establish the truth, and that needs to be presented back to the UN. And of course, the US has already said that because as a result of these claims that Bashar al-Assad has used chemical weapons, they are now have pledged to provide military support to the Syrian opposition. Now, Vladimir Putin, speaking just now in the press conference, reiterated that he thinks that sending weapons to the Syrian rebels will further escalate and destabilize the bloodshed taking place there already. And when questioned about Russia's arms sales to the Syrian government, this is what Vladimir Putin said in response.
We provide supplies in line with our official contracts to the legitimate government of President Assad. Now, on the possible weapons supplies to Syrian rebels by European countries, the British people recently witnessed an outrageous tragedy when a soldier was butchered in broad daylight in the streets of London. Many in the Syrian opposition, not all of them of course, are criminals like the ones that conducted that violent killing. Do Europeans want to supply arms to these people? What will happen to these weapons? Where will these arms end up? They could end up back in Europe. That's why we call on our partners to think twice before they take this extremely dangerous step.
Well, one of Vladimir Putin's answers brought to us by RT's Polly Boyka there. Now, less than 24 hours ago, the foreign media was writing that the Russian leader was isolated at the summit. A different image has apparently emerged this evening. RT's news editor Ivor Crotty is with me in the studio now to talk about that. You've been watching this summit, Ivor, over the last 24 hours or so. What happened to Russia's supposed isolation? I was just talking about this rhetoric we're hearing, like kind of 7 against 1. It evaporated a little, didn't it?
Well, I think at an event like this, you've got to look at the choreography, yeah? So, yes, the Canadian Prime Minister observed that Putin seemed isolated, or ran out of line that Putin was isolated at the summit. And I think if you look at the choreography of the press conferences and the communique that they've issued today, I don't think that holds any water. In fact, my read on it is that Putin didn't blink on Syria, and the others did. The point being, if you have a look at David Cameron's press conference that he gave as president of the G8, as sitting president of the G8, Cameron went through some points on foreign policy that they had decided. One of those was on Libya. That the G8 was going to strengthen the new Libyan Prime Minister's resolve and strengthen his stance in trying to bring the militias in Libya under control. He then went on to Syria and issued a 7-point declaration, which is signed by all members of the G8, including some balance on the issue of chemical weapons. There's not much finger-pointing going on there. And there's no claim that Assad has no role in any future government of Syria. There is a call for a roadmap towards a transition government in Syria, and this may or may not include Assad. And Putin is ambivalent on that issue anyway. He's not insisting that Assad has to be there one way or in or out. But a couple of statements that Cameron made suggest that it was they who blinked, and quite considerably. Cameron used the expression, "We need to learn the lessons of Iraq before we get involved heavily in Syria. And then went on to explain how Syria needed, and this is backed up in the G8 communique, that Syria needed a functioning police, government institutions, healthcare institutions, an army, the rule of law, a political system, all of which by inversion, Libya lacks. And I think Putin probably went into the G8 and said, look at what's going on in Libya, and we're not going to repeat that. And I think there was an acknowledgement there around the table that none of them wanted to repeat the mistakes of the past.
Ivor, thanks. Ivor Crotty there, senior news editor with us tonight. Thanks. I spoke to Jonathan Steele, he's a columnist for the UK's Guardian newspaper. He told me the biggest challenge for the proposed Geneva II talks will be bringing the Syrian opposition to the table, which the West seems to have no clue how to achieve.
President Putin at one point did say casually that we have agreed that all sides will put pressure on the people to attend the conference, and I think that's really important, because up till now we've heard very little from the Western side about pushing the rebels to attend the conference. All the talk in the West has been about getting the Syrian government to come, as though that is the main problem. The Syrian government has long said it would attend a conference. The rebels have been divided. They had a disastrous meeting a few weeks ago in Istanbul where they couldn't agree on coming, and they set down new conditions for attending. They can't agree on a negotiating strategy or on a leader of their delegation. So it's a real shambles, and the only way the conference can get going is if the rebels get themselves together and come to the table.